May Brooks-Kempler. She's a seasoned cybersecurity consultant, advisor, lecturer, and public speaker since 2003. She began her career as an IDF officer and has been a trusted consultant in numerous Israeli and global companies, providing advice on security architecture, risk management, business continuity, security awareness, and more. May is the founder of Helena, a cyber security company focusing on the human factor. She's also the founder of the Think Cyber Safe community on Facebook, a TED speaker, a published author, and commentator. So again, a warm welcome, May. Thank you for taking of your time to be with us this evening. Please unmute yourselves and share with us this wonderful world of cyber and safety all around it.
Hi guys, I'll just share my screen. I'm guessing you can all see the screen, right? Good. Okay. So first of all, thank you, Teddy and Aviva, for reaching out. I'm very happy to be here tonight and to talk about maintaining our safety in an online world, how to stay secure in an online world. And the good news is that we can all do it, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. So I'm not going to terrify you about all the bad things that can happen online. I mean, I am going to scare you about some of the things that can happen online, but it will give you the solutions on how to protect yourselves. So let's just dive in. So I want to ask you a few things, usually when this is a live event, so it's easier for me to see, but I will guess, because Teddy already mentioned that and Doron mentioned that, I'm going to guess that at least some of you are active on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter and eBay and Amazon and all sorts of social media. And I'm going to guess that when you're looking to book a flight to somewhere nice, I wish, I'm guessing that you're using Kayak or Booking. And I'm guessing that when you think about what to make for Passover dinner, you'll probably dive into Pinterest. Now, if you are using any sort of social media like the ones I just mentioned, or WhatsApp, Telegram, whatever, then this means that you're exposed and you're at risk. Now, I can tell you, I'm no better. If you search my name online, you'll find loads of things that can be very useful for an online scammer. You can find my birthday, my hobbies, my interests, where I live, what I like to do, where I'm writing, where I'm publishing, etc. And these are all things that can be very useful for a social engineer. Now, I have 3 kids. They were born into the internet age. And as a cybersecurity consultant, I have the skills to protect myself and, more importantly, them online. And today, we can't really tell them don't use the internet because that's how they connect to schools. So if up until about 12, 13 months ago, we could say, let's wait, let's get them online in a little later stage. Today, we can't do that. Kids from kindergarten upwards are all online. That's how they communicate with their friends, with their teachers, with the kindergarten teachers. So we don't have a choice. And my goal here today is to share some of the tools and techniques that I use to protect my family and give you the same tools and techniques so that you can protect yourselves and your families and use the internet almost without fear. Now, we know that today, over 80% of all security incidents, no matter if we're talking about personal incidents or large organizations, involve the human factor. That's us. And we need to become the strongest link and not the weakest link. Today, we're going to talk about a few things. I'm going to do a quick review of What is information security? What are we talking about? I'm going to mention a few cyber threats and real life incidents around the world. I'm going to talk mainly about the human factor because I don't want to keep this in a theoretical, on a theoretical state and not to give you the actual solutions. And mainly we're going to focus on what we can actually do about it, how we can actually protect ourselves. Now, who knows the difference between cybersecurity and information security? Anyone? About $50 to $70 an hour. No, not really. Information security is all about information. It doesn't matter if we're talking about information that is stored on computers or just pieces of paper that I have in my office. Information is information, and for most of us, that's what we want to protect. When we say cybersecurity, we're talking about everything that is connected on a cyber platform. So it could be things that are completely uninteresting for most people. For example, when a traffic light is going to change from red to green, is not confidential, but it is very important to protect. However, for most of us, we're not going to deal with cybersecurity. We're going to deal with information security. So although the media tends to regard both subjects the same way, it's not. We're going to talk about information security. So when we're talking about information, we want to maintain three main things. First of all, we want to maintain the confidentiality of our data, of our information. Everyone has data that we don't want to share with others. And that's exactly why we maintain the confidentiality. The next thing we want to protect is the integrity of the data. If, for example, I could go into my bank account and just change the placing of the decimal point, that could be great for me, not so great for my bank. So we have to make sure that all the data that we use, all the data that is being used, that is being maintained on us, is genuine and authentic, and we'll have to maintain its integrity. And last but not least, we need to have all the data available when we need it. If we have a great piece of, if I couldn't access this presentation tonight, it doesn't matter how pretty it is, and I hope you'll like it, but if I can't access it when I need it, it's completely useless. So maintaining the availability of information is another key element that we have to maintain when we're looking at information security. Now, once upon a time, life was very simple. Our information was held in paper binders in some sort of archives. But today, our information is everywhere. It's in our homes, on computers, on laptops, and mobile devices. It's somewhere floating around the cloud. We have loads of different service providers that have our data that we're connected to all the time. And we have to think about where our data is if we actually want to protect it. Now, when we look at our homes, if we look at how we protect our houses, so we can have an alarm system, a sophisticated lock, sometimes CCTV cameras, but all will fail if someone tricks us into giving them the keys. Now, the same is true for our home or office networks. We can use the best security technologies out there, firewalls, antiviruses, IPSs, DLPs. I can go on and on, but I'm not going to. But it's not going to help us if someone tricks us into giving them the keys. For example, someone tricks us into giving them our passwords. So that's why we have to be extremely alert when we work online. Now let's talk a little bit about what we're afraid of. And I'm going to talk about what we're afraid of on a personal level, on an organizational level, and even on a national level, because we're all using the internet all the time, and there are things that we're all afraid of. So one of the biggest fears for any person I ever talked to, any organization that I ever talked to, was the fear of losing our data. We all have sensitive data, personal data, important data. It can be data that is completely not confidential. For example, all of my personal pictures. all of my personal pictures are not confidential, but if I lose them and I don't have a backup, that could be heartbreaking. So when we're talking about data breach, we're talking about losing access or losing control of our data. Now, I want to mention a few names that I'm pretty sure you all know. For example, Adobe, Canva, LinkedIn, Marriott Hotels, Yahoo, Shearbit, KLS Capital. What all of these organizations and so many others have in common is that they've all suffered a major data breach. That means that our data may have been exposed. Today, we know that personal identifying information is available for most of the citizens of the United States. About 150 million people in the United States know that their data has been breached in the last 2 years. That is massive. They know that their personal identity has been breached and it is out there. And if we're looking at Israel, exactly a year ago, in February 2020, there was a major data breach, major data leak of all the information of Likud voters. Now, it wasn't just Likud voters, it was the entire database of every person in Israel with the right to vote, which means every person over 18. And that is something that we should all be very concerned about. Now, I want to mention one extreme data breach, and that's the Equifax data breach that happened back in 2018 or 2017. It affected 140 million Americans and exposed their personal data, including names, birth dates, social security numbers, addresses, etc. And I just want to show you what happened to the Equifax stock price after the breach was announced. Now, Shearbit, for example, is a privately held company, but they suffered incredible losses because of the data breach they suffered back in December. And they're still trying to recover from that incident. The public is not likely to forget anytime soon that the name Shearbit is associated with a major data breach, regardless of whether it was or was not Shearbit's fault. Another issue that we should all be concerned about is ransomware. Now, up until about 20 years ago, if a criminal organization wanted to make a lot of money, they used to kidnap our loved ones. But that is a lot of work, especially after lockdown, that I'm sure that some people would not mind having a few days off. But criminal organizations are very smart. And instead of kidnapping our loved ones, they decided to kidnap the next best thing, and that's our information. Now, as a cybersecurity professional, I can do a lot of incredible things. Really, I'm a very techy person, but I don't know how to make my kids babies again. I can't bring people back from the dead. Now, if I lose access, for example, to my personal pictures, there's nothing I can do about it. And if an attacker will attack me and kidnap for me, it's my pictures, my photos, there's not a lot I can do about it unless I protected myself ahead of time. Now, ransomware is a serious problem that affects organizations and individuals for quite a few years. It started originally started in the 1980s, but it became a phenomenon around 2013, 14. And in the last year, there has been, again, a rise in ransomware. Now, what happens? Usually, you will get an email, some sort of email message. You will click a link, download a file, and all of a sudden, you'll find out that all of your data has been encrypted. And if you want to access it, if you want to get the decryption key, you'll have to pay ransom, usually using Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. Now, we know that it happens all over the world. I want to give you a few examples. One from back in 2017, two of them actually. One was WannaCry and the other was NotPetya, two of the most devastating ransomware attacks in the world. WannaCry, that happened in May 2017, actually crippled down the NHS in England for a few days. They suffered from significant loss of ability to work, and they had to reboot all the systems, reformat all the systems, get back, update everything from back, reload from backup. It was a serious problem, and they lost over £90 million due to this attack. If we're talking about NotPetya that happened about 2 months later, in June 2017, the loss is still believed to be the largest loss due to a cyber attack that ever happened. But even in the last few months, in just last August, the Garmin paid over $10 million to attackers that managed to encrypt all of their data. Now, it's not just in the States or in the UK and other places. It happens in Israel as well. It happened with Shearbit. They did suffer some sort of ransomware, but it was mostly about the data breach. It happened to Tower Jazz Semiconductors, a semiconductors company up there in the north, and it's happening all the time. Now, when we're talking about cyber attacks, we have to differentiate between targeted attacks and not targeted attacks. Most attacks are not targeted, but when we're talking about targeted attacks, we might talk about a disgruntled employee or a disgruntled customer or partner, or even hacktivists that decide to attack us specifically. For example, like we're seeing now with the Iranians, with Pay2Key, with Black Shadow that made the attack on Shearbit and KLS, and they're using their abilities to attack Israeli companies. I can tell you that all of my domains and all of my websites are with .com or .info or other domain names, never with .il. Just because I don't want to be a target for an attack, for a hacktivist attack that is targeting Israeli companies. And I want to give you a small example of a hacktivist attack that was actually very interesting. It happened back in 2015, and a hacktivist group decided to attack the Ashley Madison website. Ashley Madison is like, well, you know, all Tinder and other singles apps. So Ashley Madison has a little bit of a different motto. Their motto is, life is short, have an affair. Now, back in 2015, a group of hacktivists decided that this is not a legitimate service, and they found it to be very offensive. And they actually hacked the company and asked them to remove the service from the internet. Now, obviously, the company who ran Ashley Madison were extremely unhappy about it because it was the geese that laid golden eggs. And they tried to negotiate with the attackers. And in the end, the attackers said, you know what? Okay, so just pay us an obscene amount of money and we'll leave you be. So they did. They paid them an obscene amount of money. But since it was hacktivism and not just hacking for financial gain, so they got the money, and then they licked the entire database of all the users of the website, because what they actually wanted was to make this website go away. So we see a lot of hacktivism, and we know that hacking is becoming a commodity. It is very easy, relatively speaking, to hack a website today, and we'll talk about it. So if your kids are tech savvy and they want to hack their neighbor's Wi-Fi, if I had to actually learn how networking works and go into the actual physics and then to networking and learn myself, today you can just go into YouTube and write, how do I hack my neighbor's Wi-Fi? And you'll get all the explanations you want. By the way, it's illegal, but you can find all the data online. And I want to give you another example, a more relevant, more personal example of a targeted attack. I want to tell you a story about Jack Curtis, that in the fall of 2015 was 21 years old. He met a girl online and they started texting each other, flirting, boy meets girl in an online age. At some point, after they've been flirting for a while, the girl asked Jake to send her an intimate photo. When he did, everything changed. His girlfriend started to threatened him. She demanded that he'll pay her ransom or she'll send the photo to his friends, to his family, to his school, to everyone. Now, at first, Jake thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. Jake paid his extortionist, and the story did not end there. She demanded more and more money, and in the end, she pushed Jake to do the only thing that made sense to him at the time, which was to take his own life. Now, unfortunately, this is not an isolated incident. There are numerous people that fell victim to sextortion. Now, sextortion is an extortion attempt, usually a targeted extortion attempt that is based on threats to publish intimate photos or videos of the target. And it can target everyone from 12-year-old kids to senior citizens over 80. Now, we have to remember that people online are not always who they claim to be. And we just had a very similar incident in the Think Safe Cyber community with a guy, a 23 or 24-year-old guy from the Haredi community that fell victim to sextortion. He met someone online, they started texting each other, flirting, had video chats, and she started extorting him. And at the time that he reached out for help, he was in a very bad place, personal place. And fortunately, we managed to stop the extortion and find the attacker and stop this entire process. But one of the things that I asked him was, even if it comes out, what's the worst that can happen? Now, it really depends who you are and what sort of community you live in. For him, it was a big deal, but for most people who are not in a very close community, yes, it's going to be very embarrassing. It's not going to be pleasant, but it's probably not going to be something that is worth taking your life for. And that's one of the things that I want to start with giving you a small tip is just think, what's the worst that can happen if someone actually uses specific data against me? So we talked about targeted attacks, we talked about data breaches, and I want to mention in very quickly another thing that we should all be afraid of, and that's cyber wars. For those of you who are at least old as I am, you probably remember this screenshot taken from the 1980s movie War Games, where a very young Matthew Broderick played the part of a hacker trying to hack a gaming company in the US. He accidentally broke into the War Operation Plan and Response computer and almost started World War III. Now, back in the 1980s, and even till about 2007, 2005, people thought of cyber wars to be the stuff of Hollywood screenwriters, not something that is relevant for everyone in the world. But today, we know that it is a real threat. It happens all the time. For those of you who are familiar with the Stuxnet incident, it was a cyber attack launched by, according to foreign correspondence, by Israel and the United States, a joint task force that developed a very sophisticated computer virus, computer worm that attacked nuclear facilities in Iran and managed to actually stop uranium enrichment program for quite some time. Now, why am I mentioning that? Because over the last year, we've seen a few incidents from both sides. We've seen the Iranians trying to hack into the water facilities and water systems in Israel. In retaliation, Israel decided to attack one of the largest seaports in Iran. And if in the past, if we wanted to attack a nuclear facility, we had to send fighter jets. Today, we'll send a computer virus. And that's really the changed paradigm in the world today. Former FBI Director Robert Mueller said that there are only two types of companies: those that have been hacked and those that will be. And even they merge into one real category: those that have been hacked and will be again. Now, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to make you realize that this is a real threat that is relevant for all of us. Now, what are we going to do about it? The first thing, we have to understand where it comes from. And I mentioned before that over 80% of all security incidents involve the human factor. The way it happens is utilizing social engineering. Social engineering is the art of manipulation. It's getting someone to do something they are not supposed to do. It can be to click a link, download a file, give someone else your password, or pay an extortionist. Social engineers exploit basic human traits, such as fear, greed, curiosity, and urgency. They use these traits to manipulate us, to create well-crafted attacks that will get us to click before we even think about it. Now, hackers respond very quickly. They know the calendar just as well as we do. And we see every year towards Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and these sort of dates, we always see special offers that are created by cyber attackers. And in the last year, we've seen attackers utilize the COVID-19 pandemic to create well-crafted emails and text messages that are targeting specifically to the fear, to the uncertainty of the pandemic. During March and April 2020, we've seen an increase of over 300% in the amount of identified malicious websites. Most of them, by the way, combine the words COVID, COVID-19, Corona, coronavirus, to actually get people to click a link. And we've seen all sorts of clever phishing attempts, from things that are portraying to be the CDC or the World Health Organization, to extortions, all sorts of extortions, even utilizing the same idea behind, like sextortion, but combining the pandemic into the story. In this case, there was a hacker that sent this email to numerous people around. It happened mostly in the UK. And he basically said, I have access to the COVID-19 virus. And if you're not going to pay me $500 using Bitcoin, I'm going to infect you and your entire family with the COVID-19 virus. So it was sort of utilizing global pandemic, cybersecurity terminology, and creating something new that was very scary for a lot of people. So it was basically biological extortion. The best way to protect ourselves against social engineering is stopping and thinking. Having your computer affected by ransomware or a virus, or giving someone else your password, is usually a result of clicking without thinking. So we have to think before we click. Now we know that many phishing emails and text messages impersonate well-known services like Amazon or eBay or Google or Microsoft, and they'll utilize urgency or fear. In many cases, the actual emails will be designed as a security alert or important message. And I want to show you one very common example that uses PayPal. Now, I don't know about you guys, but for me, PayPal and Amazon and AliExpress and eBay all know me by name. They will never just call me hello customer. They have to buy there a lot. So when I get a non-personalized message that says hello PayPal customer, hello, hey dear, or without a name in general, I know this is not something that is relevant for me. When I look who sent me the email, this is not actually PayPal, so I have to be sure. When they want me to do something and they're saying your account has been limited and I have to solve the problem within 24 hours, if I'm actually a PayPal customer, why would they only give me 24 hours to solve the problem? They want me as a customer. All of this is trying to manipulate me to act without thinking. Now, in many cases, when you get an email like this, if you click, that will be the next slide. you will see a ransomware attack, a ransomware message saying that all your files are encrypted and you can't access them. Now, I mentioned ransomware before, and the problem is that it is very easy to fall victim to a ransomware attack. Most of these emails are very well crafted, but there is one thing we can do to minimize the problem and minimize the risk due to ransomware attack. And that's just backing up our data. So if we think ahead and back up all our important data, even if we get attacked by a ransomware and all our files are encrypted, we don't care. We'll just format the disk and reboot from a backup. Now, you can use cloud backup or external storage devices like this one. This is just a 2 tera mobile hard drive. It costs about 150 shekels. And today, not backing up our data is something that we should all back up our important data, because if we lose access to it, there's nothing we can really do about it except for paying the ransom and hoping against hope that we're actually dealing with ethical hackers. Yes, there is such a thing, and they'll give us the decryption key back. Now, remember that before I mentioned that if you look for my name online, you find a lot of useful things. So may I suggest that when we finish this presentation, you search your own names online, because the internet is just like an elephant. It never forgets. What goes online stays online, and hackers use that data against us. That's exactly how social engineers create well-crafted attacks that will lure us to click a link. For example, I'm a runner. So when I publish pictures like these on my Facebook page, it's not very surprising that I get emails like these giving me special offers on running shoes or free registration for a race. These attacks use data extracted from my social media accounts to make me actually fall and click the link. Now, the problem is that the threat is not limited to the cyber realm. When we share an Instagram story while abroad, yeah, once upon a time, remember the thing with the plane that we used to go places? Basically, we're telling burglars when we're out of the house and for how long, because everyone knows that if you go to the airport and not do a selfie, it's like you haven't went anywhere. Now, the same is true when we go for a wedding and I see a story, 3 days till the wedding, 1 day till the wedding. You get back home from the wedding and surprise, surprise, someone broke into our houses. So one of the most important things we have to think about is think before we share. Our social media accounts can be used against us. We have to review our privacy settings and never upload something that might be used against us now or in the future. Now, used against us, it could be to burglar into our house. It could be to manipulate us to do something we're not supposed to do, or even to embarrass us. Try and think about our kids and what they share online. Now, think about for a minute, bear with me, and think about the stupidest thing you've done when you were about 16 or 17. Now think that this thing is not just a joke between friends 20 years later, but there is actual documentation of it somewhere online. And when our kids will go and interview for a job in 20 years, the stupid things that they've done now might come back to haunt them. So we have to think about what we're sharing online and what they share online. Now, in theory, trying to technically hack a company is difficult. There are layers of security that protect the network, but hackers are very smart. They always go for the weakest link. They go for the end user. Now, we know that random non-personalized attacks are still very common, But in cases that we see more and more today, for example, the Hacktivist Attack, we know that the attacker will do his or her homework. They will search the company on social media, look for known associates, and look for their personal interests. And then they'll build a targeted attack. The chances of them actually luring the user are very high. So usually it doesn't matter if I'm the CEO of a company or the secretary. I can be of interest just because I work for a large company or even a medium company. We've just seen the KLS hack this week. They're a tiny company. They only have about 20, 25 employees, but they were interesting enough because they have a large database and they were easy enough to attack. So even if you work for a small company or you own a small company, it doesn't mean that you're of no interest to a potential hacker. Now, we spent the last 40 minutes or so talking about very scary things. Now, the good news is that we don't have to panic. I'm the first one to say that the internet is probably the best invention there is, far before sliced bread. I never got that. But there are things that we can need to do to protect ourselves and our loved ones. And I'm going to share with you the actual tips and tricks that we can all use, because I see cyber safety as the 21st century equivalent of road safety. No one was born with the knowledge to look right and left before we cross the road. But we know that today, and we teach our kids that. And we know how to drive, even if we're not engineers. We don't have to be automotive engineers to drive a car. And the same is true for online safety. So I'll give you a few tips about how we're going to protect our houses, our accounts, our families. Now I want to start with an example regarding physical security. If we look at a bank, a good bank has layers of security. The actual money, the cash or important other possessions are kept in internal safe boxes that are kept in an internal room that is protected by CCTV cameras and alarms and armed guards. Now, when we plan our home security system or our network security system, we don't have to think about a bank. We just have to protect our houses and our networks better than those of our next door neighbors. Because no offense, I'd rather a burglar to break into my neighbors than into my house. Not because I don't like my neighbors, they're great, but I'm here to protect myself. So I'm not going to try and build my security system as safe as I would if it would have been an organization or a bank or an organization with high security requirements. But I do want to minimize the risk when we're talking about a random attack. Now, as I mentioned before, one of the first things we have to do is back up our important data. Now, personally, I use both cloud backup and external storage devices because I'm paranoid. It costs me nothing. All of my personal data and all of my corporate data is stored on a cloud computer. And that's the first thing we can do, because even if something happens, at least I know that I'm not going to lose access. I'm not going to lose the availability of my data. But that's not enough. The next thing I can do, and I should do, both for my personal use and on a corporate scale as well, is update my software, all my software on all the platforms I use, with mobile devices, personal laptops, computers, servers, etc. If I use an antivirus without updates, it's sort of like taking the 2019 flu shot against COVID. It's not going to work. We have to protect ourselves against current threats with current updated software, current updated protection mechanisms. So if we use antiviruses, and you can use, for example, for most people, they often, what sort of antivirus can we use? So for most people, especially those using Microsoft machines, just use the built-in Microsoft Defender. It's great for most personal uses. If you keep it up to date, I would say that it will give you a very strong defense layer against most common threats. Not all of them, but most of them. The second is updating our actual operation system. And that's true both for mobile devices and for computers as well, because we have to maintain everything up to date. We know that new vulnerabilities, new bugs, new malwares are constantly being invented and being identified. So we have to keep everything up to date. Another thing we have to do is maintain our passwords. Now, the reason I'm showing you toothbrushes is because, to be honest, a good password is sort of like your toothbrush. You have to pick a good one. You don't share it with other people, and you have to change it every once in a while. Now, if you do that, then you keep your passwords safe. The problem is that over 50% of people say that they share their passwords with family members, friends, etc. But for example, and partners, but only 11% actually bother to change the password after they break up. So that's not very good practice. So just think about your toothbrush and maintain your password the same. But there is one tool that we can use that will protect us against almost every, not every, but most attacks, most current attacks, and I'm referring to multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. Today, on most sites, and I'm talking about our email accounts, WhatsApp, Facebook, almost every social media account, we can use a username and password, and we can add an additional layer of security that is called a two-factor authentication. The idea is not just using something I know that is my password, but also something I have. Something I have is this specific code that is replaced every 30 seconds, 3 minutes, depends on the service that I'm using. Usually it will be sent via a text message. And the advantage of using multi-factor authentication means that even if I fell victim to a phishing attack and I gave someone else my password, it doesn't matter, because if they don't have access to my actual device, it won't help them. They'll try to access my Instagram account and they'll have my name, they'll have my password. But if they don't have the one-time authentication code that I just received, they won't be able to access the account. Now, updating this the multi-factor authentication takes literally seconds on every social media or email platform, and it could really make all the difference between success and failure of a cyber attack. Now, today, for those of you using social media, I'm sure you've heard of WhatsApp hijacking, Instagram hijacking, Facebook hijacking. The problem is, if you get one of your accounts, if one of your accounts is hijacked by a cyber attacker, they will either use it to try to extort you into paying them money to get access to your account, to get your access back, or they will use it to just sell it to the highest bidder, people who are trying to become instant influencers, and they buy accounts with 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 followers. Now, the problem is that Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, TikTok say it point blank. If your account is hijacked, we might help you, but there are no guarantees. They don't have a support system. And I've just helped a few people in the last few weeks. And we're talking about influencers, people that you know from TV, that their accounts have been hijacked. And we had to use all of our personal connections with Facebook Israel to try and regain access. So on Friday, I tried to help an amuta that lost access to its Instagram account. And basically Facebook told us, we're not going to help. We told them time and again, use two-factor authentication. If they decide not to use it, we're not going to help afterwards. I don't like this approach, but I'm trying to reduce the amounts of time it happens. So basically, if we want to stay safe online, we have to think ahead and protect our personal accounts. Use all the different devices there, all the different techniques that I've just mentioned. Use other means as well. Use privacy settings for all of your for all your social media accounts. Think before you share information online. Now, obviously, in a 45-50 minutes talk, we can't review all of the risks online, and we can't give all of the data of how to stay safe online. But I do want to invite you to, where are we? Yeah, to join the Think Safe Cyber community on Facebook. Think Safe Cyber is a community that I started about 12 months, a bit more, 13 months ago. We have over 10,000 members currently in Israel. We are planning to take it on a global level, but it will take some time. And on Think Safe Cyber, we share tips, techniques, actual tools. We give specific short videos of how to protect your privacy account, how to create privacy settings, how to use antivirus, how to update your systems, etc. We have a lot of people who are volunteer on this platform. So I'm inviting you to join us on Facebook and ask questions and share. And if you get an email or a text message or even a phone call that you're not sure if it's relevant or not, if it's safe or not, just upload it there, and we'll be happy to help. So sort of to summarize what we've been through in the last hour, we have 3 tools that we can use to protect ourselves and our loved ones online. Think before we share, before putting something online, before posting, before sharing. Think if this is something that we should share with the world. And that is something that is super important for us to talk to with our families. The next is think before we click. Look for phishing warning signs. Stop for 2 seconds and say, is this a relevant email? For example, a few days ago, I got an email from a bank. Now, it really was a beautiful example of a phishing attack. There was only one problem. I was never a customer of that bank, so there is no reason for me to get a monthly statement, but I have to stop and think about it. And the last thing is think ahead and protect our devices, protect our accounts. Think for a second. For example, I'm a terrible person. I don't have a wallet. I do not practice what I teach. And this is my wallet. You can see my cards, all my credit cards are always with me because I don't have I hate walking around with the wallet. So this is my wallet. And like most people, I don't actually remember all the codes to credit cards and things. But if you try and open my phone, you will see that it is protected, and you can't do that without my fingerprint. So that is just good practice. So even if I lose my device, okay, it's not going to be nice. I will have to call the bank. I will have to get a new driving license, new credit card, fine, but nothing significant is going to happen. And that's what I mean by thinking ahead. Where am I vulnerable and what can I do about it? I know that if you use the tools and techniques I shared with you today and you join us on the Think Safe Cyber community, you'll be able to protect yourselves and your families and use the internet almost without fear. Last but not least, I can tell you that after working in cybersecurity for quite a few years, almost 20 years now, I decided to write a book, and it was published about 6 months ago. It's called Betuchim Online. Today it's only in Hebrew. If I'll ever review the translation I got last week, it will be published in English, hopefully within a few months. We're working very hard on the translation. but you can find it on on Summit Sfarim, Stimansky, wherever. And this is a really basic guide on how to protect yourselves, your families, with a bit about social engineering and how to avoid it, how to protect your kids, how to talk to your kids, how to maintain your privacy, etc. So.
Well, thank you so much. Well, we've still got another slide, sorry.
Yeah, and now if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
If anybody would like to ask a question, please unmute yourselves and feel free to ask. And again, I would like to thank May so much for giving of her time and her experience and her good advice. And thank her for joining us this evening, and look forward to meeting you on some other platform at some time.
Thank you so much, May. It was fascinating. And I also wanted to say, if anyone thinks of questions afterwards, you can email me and I can forward them to May. So feel free to be in touch. And May, thank you so much for giving us of your time. We appreciate it so much.
Absolutely.
Good night.
It was fascinating, May. We learned so much from you. Thank you so much. It's really opened our eyes to what we need to be careful about. Thank you.
I hope I didn't scare you too much. I really tried.
Thank you again so much. And before you all go, I would like to invite you to join us to upcoming events. The first event after Pesach will be on the 18th of April. In lieu of Women's Day, we will be having Shira Putterman with a guest speaker, Michael Wunsch-Kuttler, and invite you to join us to that. And at the end of April, we'll be going to the UAE with Cindy Clown, and that will be a fascinating journey. So join us for that too. Good night to everybody, and thank you so much for joining us.
Night.